Hello, America. Judge Napolitano is Judging Freedom YouTube channel. Has a Judging Freedom YouTube channel, but he was first with Fox News. And all the networks and names the intelligence there or next to them, and exceptions like public television, and or the rules with, the World Wide Web. All exceptions too. This is a breaching method recorded that has self-valued roles with what no one self-valued, like just with black people's rights of eyes. But nothing's just without the simultaneous / hyper-simultaneous. For example, there's a distinct identity of simultaneous nature that is generating totally distinct individual species bodies. And each one of those individual species is made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies, humanity. And the only locations, areas, and states everywhere the species body has a body could operate the phenomenon of the names of countries. And a breaching method clearer than day did bad things to get names A through Z, to get the people operating names A through Z to have to defend themselves syntactically, therefore physically, therefore syntactically, further. And then with counters to that proper, where a breaching method got names A through Z to blame other things, others, or selves for things that it caused. And then it got counters to it to blame properly the people that were involved with countering them wrongly and defending that. And the breaching method propagated roles self-valued right where no one self-values it, and exploited like a magic trick, a phenomenon where people are simultaneously incapable of affording to be let alone heard, let alone to protract. Anyone with short words with convictions proper by the sciences. Forgiveness, for example, / non-forgiveness. Everyone has styles. In other words, to understand the nature of debate regarding the things that everyone debates and has debated, we have to understand how the breaching method made self-valued collusion. The breaching method, there was a breaching method that was entrenched with slavery roles, even roles with itself, entrenched. Everyone heard each other already. No one was capable of speaking as a unity, even where that was, so to an extent, everyone was and is shown simultaneously, non-distinctly, or we're all hurt by the same things. Boxings. From America to Russia to Ukraine, the suburbs were designed for a torture, extortion, fact-cheating nature, slavery method, and abuse against each age and nature of difference, because each difference, let alone every human difference, even the difference of men, women, kids, boys, girls, multi-front, the names of the people, the sciences, the experts, they can't afford to have short words discerned properly in the past and now. A breaching method shows them that. A breaching method, child abused, the experts, others, the names of the people, the sciences, retired and standing, the difference of their guilt too. That's why they're changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded. Connecticut CBS News, WFSB Channel 3 News, and the differences of guilt of their intelligence at their location or next to them. They have wire crime action methods and with their sources, with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart. And there were time use / of collusions with that, and with uses of untimely deaths, intercities, years apart. There were time uses of both of them, the ones that were, in other words, with other things, like a house, / and people along, streets next to me who will tell you They were just influenced to repeat fake things by others, including with, as recorded, people involved with interbranch attachment to fake conversations with themselves and with others, as their time collusions with people from other countries and the World Trade Center attackers, but also per worse. That has all natures of organized crimes on all sides, like psychiatry. People from Russia and from Ukraine are involved with a Leahy family and a Lombardo family, with intelligence families that have roles with predicate acts with the Wethersfield police when I was a kid, and since I was a kid and as an adult, as their roles with the intelligence family, also with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members. They have collusion/S with predicate acts with facts, for example, at campuses, and with this breaching methods roles with its uses of names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, interbranch names, their lawyers, their sources, their family members, their neighbors, other natures of conjunctions to them or physically, and the difference of that. All that is manifesting, having been exploited by this breaching method, that which maintains collusion/S, having been used to show what is actively used to control. In other words, it has them with the same sequence shifts at the same time. Those list of people in timed use/S of body dumping spots years apart, too. Increasingly, to the prisons and the campuses, and the same house/S involved are ones involved with the police phones who have been fabricating. See, there are wire crime acts and methods that are used to keep whole careers criminally foreign influenced. And the nature of debate regarding guilt used to leave out the breaching method recorded. This breaching method shows and already showed. In other words, this is further to hyper-additional collusion/S with the corrections offices of Connecticut, in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and at the town line of Hartford, no doubt. So next to it is Wethersfield and Hartford, and the judicial branch offices. And this is also manifest there, where the differences of guilt at the place next to it or conjunctive to it, as the ones involved with the World Trade Center attack, predicate acts before it, in it, and since. Now, these are predicate acts methods that are self-valued on a mass scale, because people just change. People will change and fake what others say while they are self-valuing. When people have caseloads or whatever they do, the different types of police forms, private, the difference of guilt between CIA or FBI, but it is recorded. And their roles with Facebook, all sides of criminal and civil cases. And in other words, and next to crime scenes, including campuses where they are involved with this. Facebook has collusions with people named Wells. I don't know them at all. They tried to make fake exceptions. They'll tell you this when you ask them properly. As ones involved all along Route 175 from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield, Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. They have roles with use/S of that, where they have other communicated for those founding locations than our founders left to be communicated for them. George Washington had to come there using James Madison's plan and the plural founders behind him. He didn't have the might by even a retired general like George Washington was with people. So this is before George Washington was born. A breaching method had only allowed roles with even slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies, more than England, more than 13 colonies. And it was enrolled, no one wanted those roles with those different types of 6 things, designed specifically to make people describing it in the past as, describing the roles with it, leaving out the breaching method. That's what we have discerned. We could discern just with appreciation of Uncle Tom. I didn't even read the book. Mark Twain House, Harriet Beecher Stowe House, the location/S. They have roles with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. readings of child abuses of themselves that were manifest where there were adult voices that use that word, that adult. People have been using words like crimes are still collusions with predicate acts with facts methods, like fake phone transcripts, self-value roles. Oh, I didn't know though. They switch names, forge names into branch. There's sequence shifting. They're using the names James Comey, Kash Patel. They're making them fight. They're attacking the presidents to make their only defenses, right? Where and how this breaching method is covering up and use people with narratives like democracy, the oath taking. How you take an oath to the Constitution you guys have? The founding plan of James Madison replaced. Not one has traced because you guys were child abused. And so the only one sticking up for Palestine is Jeffrey Sachs. But when he's sticking up for them, he's blaming us wrong. As collusion /S, all sides have. Defending quality of fact, cheap nature of criminal and ceaseless natures of positive treatments, negative treatments, different treatments. As collusion, but his styles pertaining is debatable. I'll prove it in court then. There are ways to say prove things in courts that with those that's what witch trials are about. That's why there's a witch trials place next to Webb House. Again, now renamed Webb Stevens Museum. Then people will take it as an attack. The news media is recorded, confess, demonstrate, confirm their influence to pretend other and because they want to hide their motives. The breaching method needs them that. The only way it will defend them, show them how to defend the readings of the law, reality of exceptions. In other words, is by forcing, tricking, hurting, changing, faking what people say, preventing short words with convictions proper regarding predicate acts, let alone methods of them. Not a legitimate voice and premises treatments could defend. Trying to argue that just because we have black pupils, whites of eyes, we have means to discern. The people attacking America and the people defending America, there's still collusion /S with the differences too. In other words, as the breaching method knew they would be. As the breaching method employed, defenses of uses of names A through Z by the locations, areas, and states. Names of the countries now through an S systems tactical ulterior from the one that generates all group differences or shows us that we are using systems abridged from its own. In other words, this is also hyper-programming. I'm being forced to, I shouldn't have to be leaking my things. Hyper-programming appreciates lists in ways that artificial intelligence can't afford to have discerned. And so they have been self-valued roles, also screening their actual motivations for where and how they're offensively pretending other and having pretended other. Extremism. Facebook has recorded roles with extremism and with New Britain Superior Court and with Wethersfield Police and with FBI Facebook pages and Whiting Forensics with sexual and medical offenders of kids, including with the Facebook pages of a principal child abuser tied to ones who was first forced. And there are more tied to him with ones at years apart that I recorded at the same time. They also brought up intercities, their roles with untimely deaths, intercities connected. I'm not saying the same killers and things like that because murders too were brought up at the same time. And confessions. This is people after the World Trade Center attack who also were recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming things to me and to the breaching method they didn't understand. Because before the World Trade Center attack, I didn't know all their names yet. And I still don't know all their names. But Hartford courts and their families and intimate ties, in the Britain Superior Court and their families and intimate ties, in the district court. They have roles with people named in the military, named Eric Burgess, Justin Kovinskis, Mike Violet, and others that know my name that planted evidences were people associated with the name O'Brien, people associated with the name from people that used to live in my area, D. Simone. These are also people at and next to Harvard Hospital with the houses and businesses and people at Harvard Hospital, including with lawyers with them, all kinds of scams, all kinds of wire app mail crime methods and relative delusions. Now, there are industries, these are ones with badges too, who have psychiatry, mental health. These are people that already used words like order, who use words like justice, who use words like law. The names of the people, the sciences have been self-value collusion /S, as also replacing, pretending things are theory like relativity / hyper-relativity. This is what Black Pupils' Rights of Eyes is about. Relativity / hyper-relativity of nature teaching us about difference. As we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. It shows us not just with this. It shows us that fish have two eyes. Birds, bear, deer, antelope. In other words, it shows us species bodies of individual bodies. It shows us that the difference between male and female is relative to its distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous / hyper-simultaneous relationship to itself, the identity generating. All group differences are showing us when we are or will be or had been using systems abridged from its own. It shows us to discern the difference between criminal insidiousness natures of positives like peace, criminal insidious natures of peace. I should say, / hyper-criminally foreign influence natures of peace. This breaching method made only capable of being self-valued roles with criminally foreign influenced, fact-treatment nature, quality aspects and natures. This keeps consciously self-valued collusions with people on all sides of criminal and civil cases. They interbranch their sources, the intelligence they're shared with other countries that are directed to hide it in ways that, in other words, but they communicate these things to others because they are also communicating it to the breaching method that is and has been roles through countries individually grouped in together too. Consciously, the UN has roles with a Bob Chase involved with the Whiting forensics. Since I was a kid, increasingly they have collusions with retired police chiefs and their intimate ties, involved with state police families, interstates, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, overt foreign and domestic military, people with the World Trade Center, people with the court next to it that day, the morning of the World Trade Center attack. WFSB is recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming. They know that they put me in fake conversations with themselves and with others about the World Trade Center attack. And I'm one of the ones that was in. And they even put me in faked and changed conversations with my family about that and with the courts, with everyone. They've been planting evidences and roles with how they use and got away with using all ages and natures of investigations, investigators, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, all exceptions used to get away with because they also planting fake exceptions. These are actors with they're relative to where and how there are ways to say, oh, so criminally foreign influence ways to say it. They know they've been refusing to identify themselves legitimately into branch. There's a detective Samuda who has roles with people from Wethersfield, Connecticut, involved intercities and interstates and internationally with the detective Samuda on off Hartford Hospital. On off Central Connecticut State University with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. And a bunch of people at Harper Hospital, like a Leahy family, is increasingly involved with foreign and domestic intelligence families and people with campuses putting fake things into databases and having people act so they can record little illusions like that. They're doing magic tricks like that. And a breaching method showed them they need to and how they could get away with it. They have the departments at Central Connecticut State University and New Britain, Connecticut, increasingly collusions with predicate acts with fax methods with people from Wethersfield who will record, confess, demonstrate, confirm these things were communicated, even though they don't realize that because communication is a semi-nonverbal. It's semi-verbal, but it's also the difference of that. There is a trinity inseparable from any body of value, from any body of value progression, including one's made up, including some of the arts, has this hyper-volume science that is the difference of the value of the smallest finite detail or the group details. Or the order of the finite. See, order relative to nature's order, hyper unabridged, hyper native pure, that distinct identity of simultaneous nature is what shows us, even if we are not a Native American, to get the Constitution unabridged, we have to appreciate fully and perfectly how Native Americans have been prevented and are still being prevented. Proper syntactical appreciation of their difference used to measure and maintain by the hyperforeign. Other things others ourselves blame from where and how nature demonstrates to them and to us. We have been using systems abridged. In other words, tactically abridged too. And self-value roles with tactically abridged relative to why and to how we have to understand multi-front. The discernment of the breaching method comes right with our self-value collusion / and there are impositions here where not one country has the names of the people of the sciences. They can't defend their logic, their roles with subject treatments and exceptions. They want to use their knowledge of good and evil to get over on how we could just enforce that quality of fact, human nature. In other words, from here, that's why they have to fake. They're shown they had to fake and change and hide what's actually digitally recorded. Fox News too. You can't record it with it. They just change and fake and hide what's actually digitally recorded. At the same time as their collusions with the same wire crime acts and methods with the phones. Wethersfield Police, Wethersfield, Connecticut. They attached me to fake being there and speaking with them. I wasn't all as a kid and as an adult. As an adult, I was there, but I didn't speak one word. I was sentenced to a Mendez police officer or any other police officer there. He forced my Saudi friend to collusion with them. Also put with the crime methods, they were recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Intercities, they do this too. With ties to the same people. They involved with child abusers, leader kids before roles when they were first forcing it parts with rather than organized crimes with them too. And then pretending, which could were police were involved, were allowed to do that. They have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and roles with exceptions again. Noted they're faking, hiding exceptions and doing it offensively, putting fake motivations too. Fake motivations, because a breaching method knew that nature itself would increasingly be demonstrating to us. One of the things that all those roles sickly distinctly against women, sickly distinctly against Native, sickly distinctly against Native tribe, sickly distinctly against boys, sickly distinctly against girls, male, female, sickly distinctly against middle age, sickly distinctly against elderly, sickly distinctly against the ground, sickly distinctly against the water, sickly distinctly against our appreciation of nature's method of communicating with positive and negative, and showing us how to discern the different, what it shows us, where it's showing us the difference between criminal insidiousness natures of positive, like peace, is not just to show us criminal foreign influences. There are hyper criminal foreign influences involved here. Let's all prepare. Just follow mandated law. Get me off the fake conversations with the news about the World Trade Center. I was next to the World Trade Center attack. I was next to the World Trade Center towers the morning of the attack, and I was in the Ninth Circuit Court as an observer, and it was proven that the court, after, right before, and with the panel of judges, had been shown from inside the court. Insidiously, they post-dated the legal papers to make them look as if they had been handed in late. Then it was proven they had been handed into the court on time, but they had insidiously been shown to the panel of judges right the morning of the World Trade Center attack, right before it. They had been shown as if it had been handed in late. And that was proven. And that led up to a 2006 district court case in Connecticut, which that was in Manhattan, New York, in the Ninth Circuit Court, right next to the World Trade Center towers. But after that, so that was in 2006 now. So all that time, but before that case and before the 2006 district court case, also in other cases, are all people that had time collusion /us against me, and from backgrounds in cases at campuses I went, and as the roles with the interbranch family members, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and proven child abusers, leaders of kids first forced. I recorded them forcing that. They're pretending it's not recorded by offensively using and having used everything that came before them to pretend other with, including the prison of a serial killer, a reported serial killer, a reported convicted serial killer. Names that next to that body dumping spot were our ones involved with the foreign and domestic, including Saudi. Forced collusions intercities with the Weathersfield Police Department and with the multiple campuses intercities. Mark Violet and others have people on Zion Street in Hartford next to Trinity College involved with a Joshua Stryker and others who have been planting evidences on all sides in my area from other areas. I never saw him in my area. He pretended he had a conversation to fake ties to me with a Dean Alford at Trinity College, and I can't get them on paper because I caught them planting evidences. And these are names, collusions with names already on all sides of criminal and civil cases and interbranch. They put self-value, the same sequence shifts, the same predicate acts, illusions, uses, self-value, and uses of that. Collusion /us they can't afford to have discerned what's actually capable of being discerned. Inter and intra-cities, and with use /us of names next to campuses. Increasingly, whiting forensics has organized crimes with other countries and with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and with crime scenes and relative body dumping spots years ago, and all these things that were an untimely deaths that were brought up with the people like a Robert Rodriguez also confirmed things on Facebook to me. And I never had a verbal conversation with him in real life in my life. 2 times they have been trying to plant evidences to make it look like other on my street. I didn't respond. I knew they were doing that. He has rules with people also I've recorded with the police with home break-ins because they're rules with federal evidences crimes and ones to cover them up. And with how it's recorded, how they keep the whole careers, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, at countries A through Z. Forgiveness is because it's relative to where and to how they were victims /hyper victims, which motivated them and what motivates them to be such and pretend other. They have to self-value too, those principal treatments reliant upon having been replaced. With James Madison declassified about that breaching method that had even reassigned what nature communicates with black people's rights of eyes, when nature is not only itself as criminal insidiousness nature, and as itself demonstrating a special difference forced from here when we're using positives without discerning the difference between how it has to. So there's a difference between things being positive three ways simultaneously to the parts of itself. Like we are shown, there's a body of forever nature that is generating to our perception three parts of time that to an extent we could discern are bound. To an extent we could discern the future, the value of seasons of that aren't even here yet, even if they never get here again. They're only increasingly valued. To an extent, there is time gone. We could the time that's gone, it's only increasing value. Here now, actively, with grouped reality / realities. But now with those words, with all words used through and as systems, all differences used through and as systems, tactical ulterior, from the one that generates totally different species, individual species bodies, made up each one of a whole bunch of individual bodies. So we can discern its difference. It even shows us grouped, male, female. It's showing us how functional to describe. There is a hyper invisible but still discernible value we have that is greater than ourselves and more finite than. And with active relativity. But we are prevented this hyper-native, distinctly if we are Native American or not, because of its roles with everyone's syntax and therefore nature of debate regarding principal treatments with American history even. The names of the people of the sciences have been using their knowledge of good and evil to pretend things that are debatable that are not. They already pretended they cared about Marbury versus Madison properly. How could they interpret Marbury versus Madison properly? They still have other communicated for James Madison and our founders, plural. And they still have self-value roles when they say things to measure and maintain. Self-value collusion / or they sense for the breaching method. Like when they say, our founders owned slaves. Our founders, that's what they fought to get. That's what they forced everyone else to help them, including the rest of the president / chief still forced by James Madison's plan, but they changed his plan. Nature itself, though, forces that same plan. So now it's the breaching method using everyone remotely, blaming other things, others themselves, rather than the breaching method. When there are needs to do that, too. They're leaving the breaching method out exactly the way it needs. And we can discern how that was and is actually exploited. The differences of guilt of names at campuses or next to them. There are timed use / S of that. Also faked for them into databases. WTNH and names next to or conjunctive to them, the differences of guilt, collusion / S roles. That's in New Britain. That's in New Haven, Connecticut. But they have roles with people from the corners of the streets all along Main Street, where it runs into Route 175 in Old Weathersfield. All natures of conjunction too, and physical conjunctions too. Web House, and right near, short skip from it, the witch trials place. And Webb House was with no the before it. They now changed the name to the Webb Stevens Museum. And then and now they still have replaced with our founders left with the answers. George Washington, we're supposed to address honestly his extortion. People don't even allow others to be honest about it. And they also have relative delusions. See, the names of the people of the sciences. Psychiatry has had self-value rules with criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality, aspects, nature, and delusions, where they have collusions with their expertise. You know, incapable of being defended as is, and also from defending ourselves at the same time. So they have self-value rules replacing what James Madison and our founders declassified about the founding plan. And about why and how, once James Madison was the president/chief, he still didn't have free speech. Someone must teach. Because the books too. See, there are syntax inside the books that were associated with the school book depository in Texas regarding the assassination of President/Chief Kennedy. That though the syntax in the books at countries A through Z, they contain demonstration/S of a hyperforeign breaching method and of collusion/S with it, and or sensing for it, including if it's any majority of people with syntax starting to adapt properly, including if it's an entire united country with syntax adapted properly, including if it is any grouping of countries, as long as we are two systems of tactical terror from the one that generates individual difference of individual species bodies, made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. The one that shows us we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. The one that shows us it is generating all difference/S. It is a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. We are distinct from the other species bodies. We are non-distinct from them too, though. And we are simultaneous with them, but per what is neither us nor them, but while it is all things anyway, so it is a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. We're going to observe that it is the value of what the predicate, of what we are appreciating by appreciating a predicate as a hyper-additional name for a verb. And while simultaneously the identity the sciences share, therefore, it is appreciating a predicate act as a law. A predicate is valued by the identity of English, and a predicate act is valued by the law. And we have means to discern predicate acts with facts, methods, needs, natures, styles, self-value, case loads, things like that. In other words, in the wire crime acts and methods, and then taking it, what people say about it, going fishing with it, start debating with people. See, this is what intelligence companies families are only capable of doing. Pretend integrity. A breaching method shows them how to think. At campuses A through Z, specifically for what forgiveness is about, we have to stay focused on the predicate with acts with facts and the predicate acts method /S, and hyper invisible but still discernible. And we need to leave guilt. Bring up guilt if we're not going to leave, only if we're not going to leave out all the collusion /S. A whole bunch of self-value collusion /S are really what's behind. Right where no one self-values it too, but it's really what's behind the shootings in America regarding where it's the worst. And timed conscious use /S, who knows the most about those statistics. Every nature of good and evil, every nature of difference treatment. It was this through systems tactical terror, from who could defend that and afford to have appreciated short words with proper by the identity the science is shared. Black people's period. Time long has been our time. But that James Madison, real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. We must all be re-educated. At countries A through Z, see suits and ties, counters, exceptions. How suburbs have quality aspects in nature that were designed for a torture, extortion, slavery method. How simultaneously even gotten away with that people could pretend other, let alone with passions. And why we could force that demonstrated online over the internet. Already they recorded the breaching method, showed them their readings of statutes regarding the validity of what's said online or typed online. They can't afford to have discerned. They already had that used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, as collusion / S with other natures of things. There are methods of organized crimes. Originally, still, that did more so. I'm not even a lawyer. That did more so to cause and to facilitate and to cover up and to control. Overt criminal enterprises and private ones did more so than them, more so than the terrorists. Get me off the fake conversations with WFSB and get the interbranch refusing to identify themselves legitimately onto paper. How many times I have to ask you guys, before the World Trade Center attack, you're going to watch what they were doing intercities. And it wasn't in illegal cases, and they weren't legitimately using all natures of investigators. Their whole careers are kept criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw. Forgiveness. They'll want forgiveness if you ask them right. And in other words, they'll just change the fake what we say and they get away with the collusions that are actually recorded. Not one reported true, in other words. So these are also people next to Fox Connecticut News involved before and after the World Trade Center attack with organized crimes and organized crime methods, and then pretending just because they have this is our job because we're supposed to be undercover or whatever. They have roles with the names next to these locations. All sides of a criminal, there are people with the name McCourt. I don't know them. They try to make fake exceptions. And with all sides of criminal and civil cases and depositions, as people involved with the FBI directors, with ongoing sequence shift cover-ups and role sensing for the breaching method, everyone mentions it. They have all kinds of fake fake phone transcripts, fake ties to people at interbranch locations, collusions with the other countries at the same time as their roles with the family members of interbranch, and the foreign at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the difference of their guilt, the intelligence, the people next to them, the conjunctions to them. In other words, what's he saying? Focus on the predicate acts. Get me off of fake conversations with the news and with the other people that they pretended in those fake stuff. All kinds of organized crime acts and methods that the news has when they next to all natures of crime scenes. This is recorded. It's the same thing in countries A through Z. Here, Anthony, boxings. And Jeffrey Sachs is right. People are starving. And this is where we get framed. This is because, in other words, this breaching method needs countries A through Z that could only be operated by locations, areas, and states A through Z, everywhere the species body is, to be blaming other things, others, ourselves for nature's increasing demonstrations to us. A human fact nature breaching method, for example. That's one of the things that all those distinct multi-front against the women, multi-front against Native American, multi-front against colonists, multi-front against, in other words, it was all about a breaching method. They were all those sickly, distinctly things. They were all equally valued as a human fact nature breaching method, a predicate acts with facts method, black pupils. We don't have to be lawyers. They will help. They were child abused. We can observe this recording. We must make them now repent. You hear the song Bach sings, but makes us shush to hear. The sciences share the identity as nature's demonstrations to us. Lo, itself its way. In many pray, vaccine.